Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So, all right. I decided to do this review again because one thing I don't think, looking back at it, I don't think I really did a very good job describing the album and all this stuff. Now, the reason why I want to do it again is because, yeah, I just don't think I really did a very good job at describing everything. But I guess this is kind of live and everything like that, so it is a little hard to do. But, anyways. Remain in the Light by Talking Heads came out in 1980, the year 1980. It's personally one of my favorite albums of the 80s. It's very ahead of its time. It's very influential in the rock music genre. It's influenced a lot of bands like Radiohead and stuff like that. It's kind of considered new wave and also post-punk. And it has a lot of tracks have influence of funk music, like dance music, beat music, all this other stuff. And there's some lyrics that are really political. There's some that sound kind of dystopian. So say like "Once in a Lifetime" kind of questions, which is my favorite song on it. Kind of questions the existence of life, why we're here, all this other stuff. What is it? What's the word? The passive of time, the theory of time, all this other stuff, and a lot of the tracks just have this really kind of really uncommon time signature, just this kind of really wonky kind of format played with the guitars and all this stuff. A lot of them kind of would fall under funk music because of that. There's a lot of tracks that have kind of a funk influence with the bass guitar, all this stuff where it's just this kind of just really kind of weird, just kind of different, just really kind of experimental kind of like guitar playing, like bass guitar playing and all this other stuff where it's really chaotic and all over the place and all this stuff, but it still resonates well. It still sounds good and all this stuff. There's only 8 tracks. The album isn't very long. It's only like about 30 minutes long, but it kind of does all it needs to do with this, personally, I'd say. And so, yeah, Born Under Punches is kind of this kind of just really kind of funk-based kind of thing. I would say The Great Curve is probably one of the more danceable tracks on here, which is, I would say, saying a good thing. They do that pretty well, I'd say. And let's see. So Once in a Lifetime, that's probably my favorite on it. It's kind of somewhat influenced by spoken word and stuff like that. It's kind of questions the existence of life, why we're here, the process of time, all this other stuff. And let's see. Listening When, the last 2 tracks are probably the 2 that sound the most different from the rest of the album, but they're I wouldn't say they're one of my favorites. I mean, they're still good. Every track's on here is good, but Listening When is just kind of this really, and then my heart, this really kind of slow, kind of more serious, kind of with this kind of really kind of ambient, it's a really, really atmospheric track of some really kind of guttural, just really kind of ambient kind of things in the background. And that sounds different. I mean, when you get to that track, you probably think that sounds a lot more different than the rest of the album. And then when you get to the Overload, it's like basically just sounds nothing like the rest of the album. And it's my least favorite probably because of that. But it's still a great track, though. It's just Overload is just really, really droney. It's almost like the guitars in it are just basically just, I don't know, just so atmospheric and ambience and all this stuff. And it sounds so weird and dark and droney and rainy, I guess. And it sounds so much different than the rest of the album. It's still a good song, but it's like not even a post-punk or new wave track. It's almost like it's a dark wave or something like that. It's just really, really droney, atmospheric. And it's the vocals are a little echoed a little bit. And yeah, they're good. Let's see, Seen and Not Seen. Yeah, that's another one of the tracks where it's kind of has one of the funk-based kind of art rock, then like post-punk kind of thing, and it has some spoken word in it as well. And House in Motion, that's probably one of the more funk-based tracks, I'd probably say. It's also one of my favorites on the album, is House is in Motion. And Crosseyed and Painless is another track I like a lot. That's also one of the more danceable tracks on it. It even has some kind of things that almost sound like electronic music at times, just because there's some really kind of heavy atmospheric, just kind of synths that are kind of brought throughout the song, I guess. And yeah, so I would say probably one of the more chaotic tracks is probably the most like experimental is easily the Overload, but I would say one of the more chaotic is probably the first track. But Once in a Lifetime, it's easily my favorite on the album. That's probably their most well-known song to date, and it's not hard to see why. But this album is one of my favorites of the 80s. It's it's a milestone in new wave and post-punk. It's a revolutionary album, and its influence obviously set a milestone in the groups in the 90s and stuff like that. And Remain in Light is one of my favorite 80s albums. Like it's one of the best new wave albums of all time. Personally, I honestly think it might be the best new wave album of all time. Either that or London Calling. But yeah, Remain in Light's a classic. Definitely great album. So I would say it's probably a 9 out of 10 for me, even though I said classic, but it is in my top 100. So yeah, might as well say that. But 9 out of 10, strong 9 out of 10 for that one. It's a good album.